My name is Becky Kovach. Thank you all for coming. I am the Senior Executive Publicist of a company called Big Picture Media. We are a New York-based PR firm, and I'm here to talk to you today about American PR and some things to know when you're thinking about initiating a US press campaign. So for those of you who haven't worked with a publicist before, just a little background on my role and what I do. I act as the liaison between artists and press. So I work with all members of my artist team to help that artist tell their story and promote whatever it is they have coming up. I utilize pitches and press releases and other materials to garner coverage around new releases, shows, festival dates, and just about anything you can think of. So for the first thing that you want to think about when it comes to US press is just when are you ready to initiate a campaign? And a lot of questions that I get asked from international artists is how do I know when I'm ready? So for the first thing that I always tell people is that you should start by growing your local audience. So play as many shows in your area as you can, go to as many shows as you can, connect with other artists in your scene. And also super important, just connect with the promoter in your scene so that when bands come through on tour and are looking for a local opener, you are kind of the first person that comes to mind for that promoter. And the way that we kind of look at artists and decide if they're ready for a press campaign or not is when we start to see that organic buzz start to grow. So writers or publications are reaching out to you saying that they want to cover your band, or there's more people posting online, more coverage coming in kind of organically and naturally. So when you kind of get to that point where things are starting to kind of build and the momentum is growing on its own, that's when you know it's time to bring in a publicist. So the next thing to think about or consider when it comes to US press is what are the benefits of a US press campaign. So when you're touring in the States or you're playing festivals in the States, you have to go through the application process for your visa. US press can be very, very beneficial for this because it shows buzz or demand in the States for you as an artist. It can also help you grow your professional network. There's a lot of industry-leading publications, and I don't think we talk about it enough, but sites like Polestar or Music Connection, Hits Magazine, they're all read not only by other artists, but also by managers, labels, agents, so it's a really great way just to get your name in front of those kinds of people. And then the other thing is just it raises your international profile, helps you build your audience on a global scale, which at the end of the day is everybody's goal, is just to grow your audience and find new listeners. The next step, once you have kind of thought about, okay, I want to start a US press campaign, is to find the right publicist for you as an artist. So this is very much dependent, like your success is dependent on your publicist and finding the right person for you. So I always recommend that artists do a lot of research and find a company that has worked with similar artists, not just genre-wise, but also have a proven track record of breaking international artists in the US space. And then at the end of the day, your publicist should be your biggest fan and somebody who genuinely loves what you are doing. So always make sure that you find somebody who is as passionate about your project as you are. So the next step is thinking about what your entryway or your hook is for a US press campaign, what it is that is going to make publications in the States care about you as an artist. So, having tour dates in the States or festival appearances is a really great way to kind of get the ball rolling. I know festivals like CMJ in the past, New Colossus Festival, South by, always have a really huge international draw, and it's a really great way to meet a lot of different writers and publications all in one space, and it's a really great way for them to get to discover new international acts. Upcoming releases are also great. We always love having new music to push. Being able to talk about new projects and what's coming next is super important when it comes to press. And just having a unique story, thinking about what makes you stand out from other artists is really great as well. I've worked with a lot of international artists in the past, and something that always comes up in interviews and the question that always gets asked is, what's your local scene like? How has it impacted you as an artist? And I think for American press, it's really interesting to learn more about local scenes in other countries because we don't necessarily have another way to discover those artists on our own. So being able to talk to artists from those countries is a really great way to learn more about other scenes. The next thing to think about is the type of campaign that you are looking to initiate with your publicist. This could be for new music, it could be for tours or festivals, and the type of campaign will really affect the length of your campaign, who we're pitching, what we're pitching, regardless of the type of campaign, lead time is always key, so always start those conversations with publicists as early as possible, especially when you are looking to break into a new area, just because it can take a little bit more lead time to get an artist in front of a writer and have them actually click play on a song or, check out a video because they've never heard of you before. The type of campaign affects the length of your campaign, who you're pitching, what you're pitching. So for new music, we're often pitching reviews, interviews, in-depth features. New music roundups have also become very popular. And for that kind of stuff, our pitch will often utilize, a list of recommended if you like artists that are similar, but maybe a little bit more recognizable to that particular writer to help them get a feel for what you will sound like. Being able to talk about an artist's inspiration is also super helpful. It helps writers connect with your music on a more personal level. And then for shows, we are often pitching for previews, for on-site coverage like reviews and photos. And for that, being able to talk to past touring experience, other artists you've played shows with in the past is super helpful, or even being able to share a live video that can kind of convey the energy of your live performance to writers and get them excited about coming out to see you. So another thing to keep in mind with US press is that no matter what, press is always a building game, but this is especially true when you're trying to break into a new territory. It can take a lot of time, especially, like I said, because these writers might not be as familiar with you as an artist or your band. So it can take a little bit of time and finesse and follow-ups before we actually get somebody to click on something and give it a chance, even if we do our research and know for a fact that this writer will love your band if they just listen to it. Every piece of press helps, even smaller publications, and something that I always tell my artists is that the writers who are writing for smaller blogs and websites now are the ones that will be writing for Billboard and Rolling Stone and Pitchfork tomorrow, so starting to develop those relationships will be really helpful in the long run as they grow and as you grow. And the goal is just to create buzz and longevity and build a strong foundation and relationships with these publications and these writers so that as time goes on, they will continue to come back to you as an artist or you as a band and want to cover more of what you're doing in the future. Something that is super helpful in that is social media. And it seems silly to say because obviously social media is such a huge part of everyone's lives these days. But it is especially important in your press campaign to remain active on socials. Every time there's a piece written about you as an artist or your band, make sure you're sharing it, make sure you're thanking those writers, thanking those publications for those pieces. Those people will remember that and will appreciate it, and it'll make them want to keep working with you. And it's really important to connect with writers in any way that you can, especially when you aren't necessarily able to connect with them in person because you are in different parts of the world. So the next thing to think about, and the next thing that you should really kind of dive deep into before a US press campaign, is just the media landscape in the States is very different, I think, than anywhere else in the world. And there's a lot of different ways that we kind of approach our press campaigns and our pitching and our targets for press. So in the US, we have our bigger national publications, and these are often genre-based. So in the alternative rock world, we've got Alternative Press, or in pop, there's Pop Crush, Taste of Country for Country, Jazz Times, Revolver. These are all publications that cater to specific genres. So that's something that we often think about when we're figuring out where we want to pitch our clients to. There's also our national general music publications like your Billboards or your Rolling Stones, Spin, Stereo Gum, Consequence. These are sites that don't necessarily cater to one specific genre, but are more open to artists of all types and styles. And then with our press campaigns, we love to dive into more lifestyle leading angles with our artists. If our artists are into cooking or sports or cars or their pets even, we'll find publications that cater to those types of interests to help listeners connect with artists on a more personal level, because we find that that's really what starts to build a fan base and helps create lifelong fans out of casual listeners. We also really focus on regional publications as well, especially when artists are going on tour. So each major city in the US has its own top tier newspapers and websites that cover things on a more local scale. So usually there does need to be some sort of a local hook for that, whether it's an upcoming show or a festival or something along those lines. So when I have a band touring through Chicago, I know that Chicago Tribune is one of those publications that I can hit up for a preview or to have somebody come out on site. In Orlando, there's Orlando Weekly, we've got Los Angeles Weekly, Austin Chronicle, all of these bigger publications that, like I said, cater to their specific areas and look for a more local hook, but have a huge readership within their area. With region, we can also look at genres, and certain genres are tied to specific regions, which is really cool to think about sometimes. So if you're in Nashville, it is the home of country music, or New Orleans is huge for jazz. Atlanta has a big hip hop scene. So you as an artist can definitely think about that as well when you are thinking about the US and press and where your genre is most prevalent. And then I don't know if this is something that like people really think about, but with the US, there are all of these kind of cultural backgrounds. So in the New England area, there's a huge Scottish population. Like that's where a lot of Scottish people seem to have landed, and same thing with Irish. So if you're thinking about coming to the US, that's another thing that you can consider. And I think I actually just got ahead of myself, but the US is also huge, which seems silly to say, but I don't think a lot of people think about that. There's a lot of different time zones, and when you're working with the US publicist, you and your publicist might be working on very different schedules, so that is something to keep in mind because we are always actively communicating with our clients. You know, the East Coast of the States is 5 hours behind, so their day is just kind of getting started right now, and ours is already kind of halfway over. The West Coast is 3 hours behind that, and we've got Mountain and Central in between. So when you need things approved from your publicist or you're sharing assets and materials, that's something to keep in mind, that the window of time you're working simultaneously is a lot smaller than it would be if you're working with someone in the same time zone. It also is something that we keep in mind for sending out pitches and press releases, and your publicist will definitely kind of talk you through best practices for that, but your publicist in the US might send your press release out at a different time than your publicist in the UK, because if you send it in the middle of the night, it'll get buried in people's inboxes and nobody will see it. The other thing with time zones to keep in mind is that you might have to be a little bit more flexible when scheduling phone or Zoom interviews, because writers in the US are all over the place and time zones might make it a little bit more difficult. So you just need to maybe be a little bit more flexible with your schedule when trying to accommodate an interview with a writer in the States. You also, in order to make the most out of your trip to the US, you can think about your genre when you're planning stops. Like I said, a lot of regions have very strong genre ties, so if there's a specific style of music that you play, look into those areas and figure out where your audience will be. Plan extra time in major cities, so New York and LA especially are huge hubs for the music industry in the US. And whenever we have bands on tour that are stopping through the US, stopping through New York and LA, we always try to plan in-person press opportunities for them. In New York, we have SiriusXM, we have Rolling Stone, we've got Cheddar and Barstool Sports. In LA, we've got Billboard, Setlist FM, and a ton of podcasts are based out there, and they all love to have bands come through their studios and do interviews. So we always try to plan for that when a band is touring through those areas. And then, like I said, the cultural communities, Scottish population is huge in Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. So New England might also be something to consider if you as a Scottish artist are going to the States. And then the last thing to think about is just budgeting, which probably seems like common sense, but PR can cost a lot more than some people realize. You will normally be working with a publicist on a monthly retainer for the length of your campaign, and the budget can very much depend on what type of campaign you're running, how long it is, and you are paying for your publicist's time, for their connections, for their pitching efforts, and with PR you very much get out of it whatever you put into it. So, you know, it's important to think about that and make sure that you've set aside the appropriate amount for your press campaign to really get the most out of it. And I think that's the end of my slideshow. I don't know how much time we have left, but I will be hanging around if anybody has any questions. I've got a one-to-one session later, and I'll be at all the showcases this week, so if anybody wants to chat more, feel free to come find me.